For feminists, gender is not about being a man, woman, or even the spectrum in between. That is just fact. The study of gender is a study in power. Gender relations are as potent as caste, class, religion in informing our view of the world.
Gender is not alone. It always works with other relations of power.
जब तक हम जेंडर को आइसोलेटेड कैटेगरी के रूप में देखते रहेंगे, काम नहीं बनेगा.
Gender is evolving and ordinary people can come out onto the street and can make things shift and happen.
Together, these structures privilege some and marginalize others. So let's say you teach history or political science or even a language. Gender will play a part in how you read that subject. Every moment of history, every economic reform, every political struggle can be seen through a gender lens. Put on those glasses. What you see may surprise you. Let's take economics. What is considered paid work and what is unpaid? Who tends to do the unpaid work? Or let's take history. Wait, what's that word again? History. But we will come to language and power later. Making textbooks feminist is not simply about adding more women to them, or even turning them into heroes. It's about opening up the world around you at its seams and putting it back together in a way that puts the unseen right in front of your eyes. So let's see what we mean by power. We'll take a civics textbook that Nirantar worked on in 2006, still used by NCERT in Indian public schools.
We were looking at the idea of equality and how that functions in a democracy. So we have the story, and let me tell you the story in brief. It's election day, and the frames have visuals of people standing in a queue. Kanta, a domestic worker, is standing in queue, and also in the queue is her employer. So they're both waiting in the same queue to cast their vote. So at that moment, it's of course a big moment of equality where you have someone, a domestic worker and her employer standing in the same line, and both of them have equal rights as citizens. But after Kanta casts her vote and her employer also, their lives diverge. So Kanta has to return home to the employer's place and start doing the domestic work. And in the evening also, Kanta has to take her daughter who has high fever to the government hospital. And there she stands in another queue. But this queue, it strikes her, is very different because she doesn't think her employer will ever have to stand in a queue to get medical treatment for her daughter. So that was used as a way to start exploring the idea of equality, what formal equality is and how it really looks like, in real life.
Body, gender, labor, and power. How does one make that visible in a textbook?
If your understanding about gender is that it is about relations of power, then gender is not alone. It always works with other relations of power. So for instance, we decided that we'll talk about agriculture in Tamil Nadu. So we created the character of Tulsi. Tulsi is an agricultural laborer who's working in the rice fields of Ramalingam, who's the owner of those fields. So through Tulsi's work, we look at the different activities that she's doing through the year, but she has a relationship of power with him because she chooses to work on his fields, though he pays her less, because she says in her narrative that, actually I get regular work from him. He always calls me. So there is assured work. So it doesn't matter if I get paid a little less. He's also the person who loans her money when she needs it. But there's not just one relationship of power. There are other women there. There are other women laborers. But there is also Karutamma, who's Ramalingam's wife. And she stands there as the supervisor who supervises the women's work. So all women are not the same. There is a Tulsi, there is also a Karutamma. They are located differently on the basis of their class or on the basis of their caste. The other question that emerges is that, is Tulsi only doing agricultural work? Because a lot of feminists have talked about the unpaid care work that women perform. So she is not just an agricultural laborer, she is also somebody who goes to fetch firewood, goes to collect water, she takes care of her children. So there is a lot of invisible work that we do not account as work, which is also part of her daily schedule. So the inclusion of Tulsi's narrative or Aruna's narrative, what it does is really, it talks about visibilizing the unpaid and the paid work that women do. So if they are performing certain production tasks, they are engaged in producing, they are also simultaneously doing a lot of unpaid care work. And so what these narratives do is actually highlight some of those dimensions. They bring them to life. And finally, we have this whole issue of mobility. There are assumptions and there is this myth that, women don't have mobility, they should be indoors, they are within the home. But the fact is that in this country, there's a large section of women who are highly mobile, who are engaged in work in the informal economy.
The Class 7 textbook explored equality from different locations: the state healthcare system, media and advertising, and the market. These chapters included questions on gender equality in access and representation, how men and women were positioned in society, and how the market governs the returns men and women receive for their work. And then, we looked at the power of language, or more specifically, how language creates power.
जब हम भाषा के मसले पे बात करते हैं तब उसमें जेंडर कैसे आता है. जब हम टेक्स्ट बुक देख रहे थे तो टेक्स्ट बुक में तो साफ हमेशा नज़र आता था कि हम पुंगलिंग में ही, मैस्कुलिन जेंडर में ही बात करते हैं. तो जब नागरिक शास्त्र की SCERT की हम लोग किताब बना रहे थे, 2003 और 2004 का वक्त था, तो उसमें हमने सोचा कि ये जो नॉर्म है कि पुंगलिंग ही हमेशा होता है, इसको हम बदल के देखते हैं. वो आसान नहीं था क्योंकि पूरी टेक्स्ट बुक कमेटी होती है, उसमें फिर पूरी बहस चली कि हम कैसे इसको करें. तो उसमें हमें ये भी लगा कि हम ऐसा नहीं चाहते हैं कि किसी एक पात्र को, महिला पात्र को ला के उसके ज़रिए हम स्त्रीलिंग को लाएं, बल्कि पूरे पाठ का एक ओरिएंटेशन ऐसा हो. और जैसे जो शब्द होते हैं आमतौर पर, श्रमिक है, नागरिक है, उसमें हम ये एज्यूम करके चलते हैं कि उसमें महिला नागरिक, महिला श्रमिक उसमें इंक्लूडेड है और उसका फिर प्रयोग हम पुल्लिंग में ही करते हैं. तो निरंतर में हम लोगों ने आपस में चर्चा करके ये तय किया कि हम नागरिक शब्द का इस्तेमाल और व्यक्ति शब्द का इस्तेमाल स्त्रीलिंग में करेंगे. नागरिकता को जब हम एक सदस्यता के रूप में देखते हैं तो उसमें नागरिक एक सदस्य बनती है. इस तरह का प्रयोग हम लोगों ने किया पूरे पाठ में. न केवल बहस हुई लेकिन वो सहमत हुई इस प्रयोग से. हम एक बुनियादी और स्ट्रक्चरल सवाल उठा रहे थे कि टेक्स्ट बुक की भाषा जिसमें हमारे इतने बच्चे हैं, हम किस तरीके से जेंडर संवेदनशील बना सकते हैं टेक्स्ट बुक को. बाद में भी कई लोगों ने इस पे आपत्ति उठाई कि आप नागरिक को स्त्रीलिंग में कैसे इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं, आपको तो स्त्रीलिंग पुल्लिंग का ही ज्ञान नहीं है, आपकी भाषा ही गड़बड़ है.
This is what we mean by opening the world at its seams. The seams are where the stories are. Every image you have about how the world should look like began in our textbooks. So we decided to look at the primary image, our bodies, and shake that up a little.
जब हम मल्टीपल आइडेंटिटी की बात करते हैं, डिफरेंट सोशल कैटेगरीज़ की बात करते हैं, तो जब तक हम जेंडर को आइसोलेटेड कैटेगरी के रूप में देखते रहेंगे, काम नहीं बनेगा. जब तक हम उसका जाति से, धर्म से, क्षेत्र से, भाषा से, यौनिकता से जुड़ाव नहीं देखेंगे और इन सब को एक समग्र रूप में नहीं देखेंगे, तब तक टेक्स्ट बुक में हम कुछ भी कर लें, वो टेक्स्ट बुक हमारी जो वास्तविक जिंदगी है उसको नहीं दिखलाएगी.
In the past, there was a kind of a trend towards flattening identities. So, all men were in this homogeneous category as men, and all women were sort of portrayed in this very middle class characters, or at most you would have a peasant or you would have a worker. And in these new textbooks, what we did was the opposite of this. We actually layered these identities. We didn't flatten them.
we realize that instead of locking a learner into one vision of the world, if a textbook could open up new possibilities, new imaginations, new intersections, a learner may be able to find themselves in a textbook. Because what is the point of an education that doesn't tell you the one thing you need to know? That you can make a change. Structures may persist, but societies change, languages change, we change, and slowly, some structures shift.
What happened in the new textbooks was that there was a focus on ordinary people. There was also an attempt to understand how does change really happen? Does it really happen through great individuals and men, so to speak? Is it really history? Also, change as being a very complex phenomena where people also, through their everyday practices, through what they do on a daily basis, make change happen. You know, there are moments in our history which impact ordinary people. So, for instance, if you look at the Indian sari, you assume that the sari is worn today with the petticoat, it's worn with the blouse, and it's worn in a particular way, and there is some diversity in the pallus. But how did the sari come to be? Did it always, was it always worn in this manner in the past, or was it something that has emerged? And where did the petticoat come from? So the term petticoat really comes from the Victorian dress. Petticoats were worn under Victorian dresses. But it became part of the Indian sari, which meant that we were not wearing petticoats before. Then who was wearing the petticoat? It was the Bhadralok woman, the new educated woman of the 19th century, who first started going to school. She had to be marked and become respectable to go to school. So her attire was given particular attention, and the sari then emerged in a particular form. So there is a certain kind of class formation that's happening in India, and there's also simultaneously the evolution of the Indian sari as we know it today. And then there are questions about who can wear the sari, who can wear the blouse in a particular way. So there were experiences of so-called lower caste women who were banned from wearing blouses because blouses were a sign of respectability, and their bodies could not bear that sign of respectability because they had to labor and they had to be seen in that hierarchy of caste in a particular way. So all of these factors, what we assume as very natural and normal in our dress today, or what we assume as our national Indian dress, it was also created as part of a particular process.
I think for a long time, textbooks imagine a middle class urban child to be the kind of audience that they are addressing. So we kind of changed that and said that no, that's not the only reader of a textbook. It could be a tribal boy in Chhattisgarh, it could be a Dalit child in a village in UP, it could be a Christian girl somewhere else. So when you change that frame, I think the way you look at gender also automatically changes.
Gender is not just about women, it's also about men and who you choose to include.
So one of the ideas in terms of promoting the idea of gender equality was to actually challenge the idea of stereotypes. I think what we try to do in the class 7 textbook is that stereotypes actually impact both boys and girls, and that's why coming back to the point that gender is not only about women and girls. So we have another storyboard. We have this young boy called Xavier who actually wants to study social sciences, but there is so much pressure on him from his parents that he should take maths and science, because as a boy he will have to become a provider, and if you do social sciences you're never going to get a job. So what we were trying to say is that even boys, are often boxed in and are forced to lead a certain kind of path. So if we want a more gender equal society, we have to kind of challenge the idea of stereotypes for both boys and girls.
जब हम छत्तीसगढ़ की किताब बना रहे थे, संस्कृत की ही किताब, तो उसका मैं एक उदाहरण देना चाहूँगी। पिछले 1-2 दशक से चल रहा है कि संस्कृत भी ऐसी हो कि हम उसमें वार्तालाप कर पाएँ, हम उसमें बातचीत कर पाएँ। तो हुआ कि पहला पाठ संभाषण का होगा, यानी बातचीत का होगा। तो ठीक है, बातचीत का होगा। तो उसमें कौन से पात्र होंगे, कौन से बच्चे होंगे, बातचीत ऐसी सहज ही लगनी चाहिए कि जो छत्तीसगढ़ के बच्चे उससे रिलेट कर पाएँ। तो छत्तीसगढ़ में चूँकि क्लासरूम की कंपोजिशन अब बदल गई है और हम जानते हैं कि सरकारी किताबें कौन सा वर्ग पढ़ रहा है, सरकारी स्कूल में कौन से बच्चे आ रहे हैं, और वहाँ एक बड़ी संख्या ट्राइबल्स की है, ईसाइयों की भी है। तो हमने उसमें कई नाम ऐसे खास करके लाने का प्रयास किया और लाने में हम सफल भी हुए, जो कि वहाँ आम तौर पर हमें मिल जाएंगे। फ्लोरा है, पीला राम है। तो हमारा संभाषण, ये चैप्टर ही शुरू हुआ फ्लोरा, पीला राम, विद्यावती, इनके संवाद से। इस पे इतना हंगामा हुआ और ये राजनीतिक मुद्दा बन गया। विधानसभा तक में इसमें सवाल हुआ कि संस्कृत की किताब को अपवित्र किया जा रहा। अब फ्लोरा और पीला राम जैसे नाम, पीला राम के बारे में तो किसी ने खुल के नहीं कहा, लेकिन फ्लोरा जैसा नाम जो विधर्मी और विदेशी हमें साउंड करता है, वो संस्कृत की किताब की पवित्रता को नष्ट कर रहा है। तो इस तरह की अड़चनें भी आई, क्योंकि संस्कृत की टेक्स्ट बुक इतनी पवित्र बना दी जाती है, खुद पूरे करिकुलम में भी। आज क्लासरूम का भी कंपोजिशन बदल गया है, तो हमको भाषा के व्याकरण को भी पलट के देखना होगा। न केवल नए शब्द हमको बनाने होंगे, बल्कि भाषा के नियमों को भी देखना होगा।
Feminist educators recognize that the process of knowledge construction in the realm of school education is contested, negotiated, and imbued in power relations.
So my learning from this process of creating textbooks and from a feminist perspective is that there are no perfect school textbooks, that they need to be constantly looked at and interrogated and changed and reworked, because knowledge is constantly being constructed, created, and new forms of knowledge are emerging. And I think textbooks constantly need to keep that in mind.
हम कहेंगे कि शुरुआत हुई है और इस दिशा में बहुत काम करने की ज़रूरत है। तो हमको टीचर्स ट्रेनिंग पे काम करना पड़ेगा, हमको इवैल्यूएशन पे काम करना पड़ेगा, हमको पॉलिसी लेवल पे काम करना पड़ेगा। तब जाकर के शायद हम एक जो जेंडर इतना बड़ा मसला है उसको लेकर के एक समझ पैदा कर सकते हैं।
Today, issues of sexuality, identity are emerging in new ways, which they weren't 10 years ago. And I think that those concerns need to come in. New kinds of challenges emerge, new changes happen. So as society changes, I think that we need to also be very, very mindful of the fact that knowledge is a process and it involves both the agency of people and communities, and at the same time it involves the ways in which structures and institutions absorb or expand through those pushes and pulls.
So very often the textbook is the only written material that you will find. So I think making these textbooks meaningful, attractive, to have the visuals, to be communicating something becomes all the more critical. Because in the end it might be the only kind of book that's available for a child.